Welcome everyone to David Dudley Outdoors, and yes, today we're going to talk about a topic that's going to be hot here in probably a month or two, depending on what part of the United States you're in, whether you're living in Texas or you could go all the way up to Michigan. Your seasons are going to vary. We can agree with that. So we're going to talk about springtime colors fishing for bass, which is red. When it comes to early season bass fishing, you're going to use red typically a lot of the time. So when it comes to late winter, early time spring, and you're looking for bass and they're trying to move up there shallow, red is going to be one of the dominant colors. So we're going to talk about why is red a dominant color, because after the springtime, really after the first part of spring, when you get into middle part of spring, red really stops playing a role, and I'm going to teach you why red kind of fades out and why it is really a wintertime and springtime crankbait that you're going to want to throw for bass with the color of red on your crankbait. So let's get into it. Let's talk about crawdads. Okay, let's talk about crawdads. What do crawdads do? So crawdads, their year cycle is this. When the water's warm, they're out and about. They're out where bass can see them. They're out where they can be eaten. They're out trying to camouflage their self with the cover they're around. So naturally, if they're around grass or rocks or whatever they're in, they're going to have a camouflaged color to them. So that's why does green pumpkin dominate? Pretty much because that's the color of a lot of structure that's in the water. Whether it's why does watermelon dominate? Pretty much the same thing. Depending on your water clarity, those two colors in clear water are going to dominate. So we're going to talk about why red in the spring. So when crawdads are out and they're just doing their thing all time in the winter, in the summer months, life is good. Water temperature's great. They're loving life. Now, all of a sudden, we're entering into the winter time of the year. What's happening? The water's getting a lot colder, and that's when the crawdads start burying up. That's when they start going up underneath the rocks. They're not going to come out till springtime. They're not going to emerge themselves until late part of winter, early time of spring. So what do? Crawdads bury up. Whether they're going up underneath of rocks, they bury themselves in mud banks, whatever they can get themselves buried in to hibernate. That's what the crabs. That's what the crawdads are going to do. So what happens when they bury themselves up in a mud bank? They find a little place and they just dig and dig and dig. You've seen crawdad holes. They bury it up all winter long. That clay, that red dirt, that red hue comes on them. They're not moving. They're not getting washed off. They're not just doing anything. So then all of a sudden the water starts to warm and they're coming out of their crawdad holes. They're coming out from underneath the rocks. They're coming out. And what are they going to have on them? Naturally, they're going to have that red look. They're going to have a red hue. So let's talk about different color reds that I might be talking about. And when I say reds, I'm dealing a little bit with orange. I mean, we're talking reds and orange, but basically colors of red. So you're going to have a red and orange. Now, granted, you can trick it out. Let me see if I can get that camera to focus. You could trick it out a little bit with some scales of like a crawdad, or you have translucent reds, and I'm going to talk about that because that is a big key when to throw translucent reds. Here's another translucent red, and we have a reds, browns, and oranges. So right there you see red, browns, and oranges. When I talk about red crankbaits, I just showed you a variety of reds that you may choose. Now, we talked about translucent. I mentioned that just a second ago. Why is translucent crankbait? When do you throw a translucent, which means you can see, it's kind of got a hue, you can kind of see through this red. This is actually a wiggle wart. You can kind of see through it. When are you going to want to throw translucent, and when are you going to want to throw just a boom, a very loud red? Okay, so when the crawdads first start coming out, you're going to want to throw a very loud red. When it's late winter, very early spring, I'm going with the very loud red. I'm going with in-your-face red. Now, the crawdad patterns you choose on whatever crankbait you're throwing, you know, I'm not sure if that bass is studying the crawdad pattern when it's coming by him. I think it's just a contrast thing. It's just a, you know, a red hue. It's a reaction bait a lot of times. That's what you're going to want to be triggering the bass with. Typically, it's going to be a reaction bait with the color red. So, what have I just explained? So we're talking about crawdads coming out of the ground. They're going to have a red hue to them. Naturally, they're going to have red coming through their whole shell. They've been cooped up all winter. Now let's talk about the shad, okay? Why would you even want to throw something red with shad? Let's talk about what shad do. Wintertime, where do they go? Now listen, shad cannot hold still. If I was to hold a shad still like this, he'd die. A shad has to constantly be moving in order for him to stay alive. He has to have water flowing through his gills at all time. A crappie, a bass can sit still, breathe, and everything's good. Stripers, for instance, a tuna, shad, those are fish that have to keep moving in order to stay alive. Now let's talk about where they're wintering at. Now, we could talk about gizzard shad. Gizzard shad, threadfin shad, it doesn't matter what shad, they're going to go down to the deeps. They're going to go, like right now, it's wintertime, and I'm throw netting in 50 foot of water with a throw net. Okay? So I'm going down as deep as it gets. They're sluggish, they're on the bottom, they're sucked on the bottom. Their chin, their bellies, their everything is getting red and raw, and it has that red hue to them. Now, when they come up, okay, they're coming up, it's springtime, they're coming up. When they first get up, they have a redness to them. They have a red hue to them. They're going to start moving faster. They're going to start washing away some of the mud, some of the red. We've caught bass in the wintertime, right? Have you ever jigged a spoon, caught bass, and had mud on its belly? Well, shad don't sit still like a bass, but they keep moving, and they're constantly moving dead on the bottom where it's red. So even shad have a red hue to them. So let's talk about the translucent color. I'm not sure if I covered that right, but I'm going to go back and cover it. So translucent colors, I use those when we get like you have early spring, mid-spring, late spring. Late spring being the spawn, mid-spring kind of being the pre-spawn, and very early spring is kind of pre-spawn. However you want to label it, you guys understand what I'm saying. So as we get to the mid part of spawn to the late part of spring, as we get to the late part of the spring, they're cleaning up. The crawdads have washed away a lot of the orangish, reddish hue to them. We're getting more towards the latter part of spring. That's when I'm going to choose a translucent, where it's not as loud. It's not as dominated with a loud color. And when I say loud, I'm talking loud, very in your face, and translucent colors. So red dominates, guys. It really does. Early spring. I actually have a early springtime box where I have all kinds of different red crankbaits, because after the late winter, spring, that box sits on the shelf until the following year. Okay, I'm just that way with red. I'll never throw red after pretty much the springtime. It goes on my shelf and won't come back out until late winter, early spring. Guys, I hope you learned that. I'm giving y'all hopefully some good advice that here in the next few months you're going to be able to catch a lot more bass. Thinking through what you're doing and how you're acting out on the water is a big key to being successful out on the water. It's the little things, we've heard it, it's the little things that make a difference. Guys, hit the thumbs up button, and guys, hit the subscribe button. Please hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. Share this video and hit the notification. Guys, you've been great to me. I read all your comments. I appreciate what you guys do, and I'm needing people to do the outro. And as I'm traveling this winter, if you see me and I have a camera, come up to me and I'll record you doing the outro.